Ohio.
In 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. sent out a call. He called on clergy from across the nation to come to Selma and engage with injustice. I imagine that mimeographed letters were mailed and long-distance phone calls were utilized, perhaps even telegrams. By today's standards, such an effort would have been quite labor-intensive and time-consuming. Postal rates had just jumped 25% from 4 cents to 5 cents per letter. Dialing an old rotary phone across the country could quickly run into dollars, and I'm sure that much of King's call was passed on by word of mouth. And yet, despite the time lags and the costs, the call did go out, and the call was heard. Because that's the strength of a moral call. When a moral call falls on fertile soil, the harvest is bountiful and quick. Today the call goes out over the internet. It gets posted to Facebook and news feeds. It's discussed on Blogger and WordPress. It gets tweeted and pinned, liked and shared. A moral call in the 21st century travels at the speed of light, borne on the winds of electrical pulses over fiber optic cables and through networking towers. And though the method of disseminating a call has changed, its content has not. A moral call remains an imperative, an irresistible appeal to action and support from people in need to those with resources of time, energy, money, and spirit to commit. The language of callings is familiar to us. Most religious congregations come about because a group of like-minded people felt a call to create something regular, something permanent. Unitarian Universalist fellowships often survive because the call to persevere is strong, especially when they provide one of the few options for people seeking a religious community unbound by dominant local creeds. A body open to sheltering a wide range of theologies, spiritualities, personal characteristics, and philosophies. But as every student in introductory psychology classes learns, there's more to life than meeting the basic need for shelter. Human needs exceed those mere physiological demands for food and water. Meeting the need for secure jobs, families, homes, and communities. Maslow's theory of human needs hypothesizes a hierarchy with these things as the foundation of the pyramid. Our larger communities usually meet these basic physiological needs. To a large degree, our religious community answers the call to meet the next level of human needs, for love and a sense of belonging. Our church friends become our partners on a spiritual journey, comrades for years of shared joys and sorrows, celebrations and study. A church can also do much to meet the next step in the pyramid, for self-esteem and respect. And especially for Unitarian Universalists who affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, our religious societies are integral providers of opportunities to achieve, to grow, and to gain a sense of inner confidence. A successful spiritual home can endure for many years by providing structure, activities, and rituals that address these core human needs. But the language of call is not just about safety and friendship, about love and community. Hearing and heeding a religious call is much more than attending services, serving on teams and committees, or sustaining the physical, fiscal, and human resources of a congregational enterprise. A religious call especially for a people committed to justice, entails addressing the peak of Maslow's pyramid, self-actualization. Here, members of a religious community address not only their own needs and the needs of fellow members and friends, but the needs of society as a whole, the needs of total strangers. This is the realm of morality, of creating solutions to social problems, of cleansing ourselves of prejudice and bias, of achieving the beloved community. The religious call provides us the opportunity to witness. Now, in this context, witnessing is not the act of observing others, but the act of publicly affirming one's faith. I believe that witnessing is what Maslow meant by self-actualization. Witnessing is the culminating act toward establishing oneself as a whole person and acting upon that creation. Through a combination of meticulous study and reflection, years of contemplation and understanding, and trusting one's own developing intuition to embrace spontaneous expression. A public witness is a revelatory act of self-actualization. Now, what's all that mean in plain English? Following Maslow's model, it means shelter the homeless, feed the hungry, befriend the marginalized, empower the oppressed, and finally, do whatever it takes to help the community of humankind improve itself, to become the best it can. And we do that by striving to become whole persons ourselves, and then witnessing our faith publicly.
There we go.
Wild and wonderful. When we talk about justice, what goal lies at the end of our quest? How would we determine whether or not we are living in a just society? The root of justice lies in the prevalence and the impact of privilege. Privilege is an inherent advantage that one person has over another, a privilege unearned but simply acquired at birth. This advantage may vary in its degree of significance, but what matters is that the advantage is real. Now, some privileges may create what for most people might be considered a modest inconvenience. For instance, being born left-handed today presents challenges when using certain tools or equipment, but nothing like it used to in previous centuries. Some privileges expose people to a greater level of ridicule or presumption. For instance, natural blondes still experience more jokes than do natural brunettes or redheads. Other privileges can, in time, be overcome given certain circumstances. For instance, being born into a poor family can create disadvantage, but those disadvantages can be overcome, even eliminated, if financial resources become available. Being born in a rural area may expose a child to a paucity of resources that moving to a more urban or suburban area might cure. Now, these are noteworthy areas of privilege, and they deserve attention. But the most serious privileges in our society include skin color, ethnicity, sex and gender identity, and sexual orientation. A boy born with brown skin is almost certainly guaranteed to experience disadvantages that an otherwise identical boy with pink skin will not. From birth, people of color in America are treated differently than so-called white people. from teachers to store owners to the police. Being white in America carries an enormous advantage of privilege. An advantage that the white people did absolutely nothing to earn, but from which they benefit every day. A girl in America is disadvantaged relative to a boy in a wide variety of ways. It is no accident that the number of scientists, doctors, lawyers, and professionals of all kinds skew heavily toward men. Privilege is the reason that you constantly see scantily clad women advertising products that have nothing to do with their attire. Male privilege is the foundation of our shocking statistics on rape and sexual assault, the continued trafficking of women and girls by men, and the prevalence of pornography and sexual objectification of women throughout our media. And privilege lies at the core of the injustices we are protesting in Raleigh and elsewhere in this country. Recent efforts to impose unfair voter restrictions categorically affect minorities more than whites. The seemingly endless assault on reproductive freedoms singles out women, treating them as nothing more than incubators and subjects to the whims of the legislators that are dominated by elderly and middle-aged men. And the pitched battle to deny loving gay couples marital rights has little to do with so-called traditional marriage and much more to do with straight privilege. So it is imperative that minorities speak out against racism, that women speak out against misogyny, and that LGBT folks speak out against homophobia. But of perhaps greater importance, whites standing on the side of love against race hatred. Men standing on the side of love opposed to violence against women. And straight people standing on the side of love against gay bashing and bullying. Justice is more than just thinking good thoughts. Justice is more than expressions of compassion and mercy for the unfortunate. Justice is piling the weights of freedom onto the scales of society until the balance is achieved. Justice is us utilizing our free speech, our free assembly, and our ballots in moral dissent against an unjust status quo whenever needed. We Unitarian Universalists often struggle with absolutes. We proudly proclaim ourselves to be a non-creedal religion because we hold that no one religious truth should ever be used to exclude people from participating in our religious communities. I dare say that every Unitarian Universalist has at one time or another struggled with the language of our 7 principles when considering a specific issue or a circumstance that presents us with moral ambiguity or conflicting purposes. Our Universalist heritage leads us to eschew the notion of hell, but leaves us to grapple with the notion of evil. So while we preach that God is love, we're left to consider the question, what is the opposite of love against which we fight? Is it evil? But if we don't believe in evil, then what? So we avoid the absolutes. We open our arms wider to embrace the oppressed, the rejected, the other. But we avoid confronting difficult and painful subjects that make us uncomfortable. We take stands, but we debate endlessly over the rhetoric describing our positions. We honor the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, but never hold ourselves accountable for ever reaching any conclusions to our quest or applying those conclusions to creating meaningful social change. But whether evil exists, or God exists, or any absolute truth exists, we know that wrong exists. When legislators cut access to millions of the poor to Medicaid, that is wrong. When politicians undermine the access of minorities, students, and the elderly to voting, that is wrong. When we cut food stamps to families with hungry children, that is wrong. When we cut funding to public education to pay for tax breaks for the wealthy, that is wrong. When we cut assistance for the unemployed, suppress wages and labor unions, and reward job exporters, that is wrong. And when we deny medical treatment to women, to LGBT folk, to the poor, to anybody, that is wrong. When Henry David Thoreau refused to pay the poll tax that was intended to fund a war he considered unjust, he spent a night in jail and afterwards wrote his famous essay on civil disobedience. He told us that it is our duty to resist an unjust law. We hold up Unitarians and Universalists in our past who resisted unjust laws because moral dissent is our calling. And moral dissenters are a necessity for the destiny of democracy. So whatever our difficulty with absolutes, with specific words to describe our theologies, our principles, or our beliefs, we must remember that some things are simply morally wrong, and that we have a duty to be moral dissenters. As the Reverend William Barber, head of the NAACP here in North Carolina, said, "We must look at public policy through the moral lens of justice for all, and through the constitutional principle of the common good." We Unitarian Universalists must force the discussion on public policy decisions that are not simply bad policy, but are morally wrong. Because the opposite of love is not evil. The opposite of love is indifference. It is silence. And our commitment to justice, equity, and compassion in human relations calls on us to stand on the side of love, to stand in dissent against immorality and injustice.